from the studios of Ave Maria Radio in Ann Arbor, this is Veterans Radio. And now, here's your host, Gary Lilly.
Good morning to all of our troops on active duty, on land, in the air, and at sea. You have our respect and admiration. Good morning to my veteran brothers and sisters. Welcome home. Good morning, America, and to all of the people in other countries who are listening in on Veterans Radio via the Internet. Good morning to all, and welcome to Veterans Radio, brought to you by Ave Maria Radio Studios in Ann Arbor, Michigan. This morning I've got a show that I've been looking forward to for a year, and sitting in the studio with me is Dale Throneberry, the old slick pilot.
Above the best.
And over on the control board is Bob Gould, the old paratrooper.
Here's to you, Mrs. Allison.
Mrs. Allison.
That's
okay.
right.
All right, we won't talk about
That's
that.
a code.
Okay. All right, good deal. The guests this morning are slick pilots, and one of them is sitting across the table from me, and that's Dale Throneberry, who's going to be on the other side of the interview this morning. But right now, Dale, you've got some news, do you?
I've got a couple of events coming up. Earlier I was mentioning how confused I am this morning about what my role is. But anyway, there is an event coming up in Adrian, Michigan. It's a Veterans Benefits Seminar. It's going to be this coming Tuesday, October 16th at 6:30 p.m. at the Grand Court Adrian. And it's for wartime veterans and surviving spouses. It's a seminar on veterans benefits for assisted living. At this seminar, you'll learn all about the funds and programs that are available to you as a surviving veteran. In fact, wartime veterans may qualify up to almost $1,500 a month, and surviving spouses up to $975 a month. There is reserved seating, so you need to call Sherry Watkins at the Grand Court Adrian. Call 800-850-5504. That's 800-850-5504 if you'd like some more information. Getting into some of our news, we have President Bush announced on last week, or this week on October 11th, that U.S. Navy SEAL Lieutenant Michael Murphy from Long Island, New York, who was killed while leading a reconnaissance mission deep behind enemy lines in Afghanistan, will receive the nation's highest military award for valor, the Medal of Honor. Murphy was killed in June of 2005 while leading a four-man special recon team east of Azzottabad in the Hindu Kush of Afghanistan. The team was trying to find a key Taliban leader in the mountainous terrain when it came under fire. Murphy was shot when he crawled into an open space to signal for help. He is the first Armed Forces service member to receive the Medal of Honor for combat in Afghanistan.
Dale, that hardly tells the story, doesn't it?
No.
Called out, calling for help, and received the Medal of Honor. What must have been going on?
I can't imagine, because it said that they were on a four-man recon team east of Azzottabad, and they got surrounded. They were overrun. Even after he was wounded, it said he crawled into the open area to make a mic call for help and continued to fight. The call ultimately allowed the rescue of one wounded SEAL and the recoveries of the other three bodies. One of the things we talked about last week, remember, in talking with Kenny Fields about him getting shot down over Laos, was how many people does it take to rescue one, and how do you weigh the cost? Because the U.S. helicopter that went in to try and rescue the SEALs was shot down by enemy fire, and 16 more SEALs and Army Special troops were killed in the crash. So it just kind of, again, goes on what people will do, what Americans will do to save their buddies.
And never leave anybody behind. Right now, we've got one of our partners, Ken Rogie, is on the air. Ken's partaking in a special event today. Ken, are you on with us?
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. Tell us what you're doing right now, Ken.
Well, we just landed in Baltimore International Airport, and we're getting ready to get off, and we'll be getting on some buses. We've got 3 buses to carry these veterans to the different monuments, and of course,
Ken, you're on a Pride and Honor flight, correct?
That's the Pride and Honor flight. Yes,
Yep.
we're gonna be going to the World War II monument first. This is an amazing program. We've got nearly 90 veterans, World War II veterans, on this flight, and about 35 Guardians. Guardians are along. They pay their own way to just help the veterans to get around town. The veterans themselves do not pay for the flight. It's all raised by donations, corporate donations, and so on, to pay for these flights.
Ken, what these Pride and Honor flights are is taking World War II vets that couldn't get there otherwise to the World War II monument to see what was built to honor them. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And you're with a group of them now, and you're interviewing them on the way to the monument, and you're going to interview them again on the way back to see how it felt, and that will be a future show on Veterans Radio, correct?
Yes, we're planning on doing that for the Saturday after Thanksgiving.
What a Thanksgiving show. Just terrific.
It should be a good show. This is a great bunch of guys. Every one of them I've talked to so far has been wonderful. They're very excited about seeing the monument and making this trip to D.C.
And later on that show, we're going to learn how people can donate themselves to support that. I hear there's one guy that has donated 600 flights all by himself. $200 a pack.
I heard that too. That's amazing.
I hear you're in the airport. We can hear it. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Ken?
No, it just looks like it's going to be a beautiful day. The sun is shining. It's supposed to be up in the high 60s, so it's going to be a glorious day.
Good for them. Tell them all welcome home, and thank you.
I will do that.
Thanks, Ken.
We'll talk to you guys later.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Hoo-wah!
That's a great idea. For all of you that are listening out there on the internet and you're in the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area, head on down to the World War II Memorial today, and you're going to see a whole bunch of World War II veterans from Michigan and probably most of the Midwest. I think it's a great program.
That's wonderful. I mean, these guys, they were honored when they came home for sure, but to have their own monument. And if you see it, it's gorgeous. It's beautiful. We spent a lot of money on it, but that was money well spent.
Well, it only took 60 years to build it.
Right. Future generations need to know what people have done to keep them free.
It is true. It is true. A little bit back to the news. I'm going to. We found a story. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Also, the DoD, Department of Defense, looks like it's going to lose the authority to rate disabilities. Remember, we've talked about the overlapping of the DoD with Veterans Affairs and how the DoD has been attempting. It sounds like to keep the percentage of disability down below 30%, because if it's below 30%, then they don't have to pay lifetime benefits, health insurance, and so forth to you at that time. If it's over 30%, then you are entitled to lifetime benefits and health care and so on and so forth. So it looks like one of our fights as veterans out there is actually going to come to fruition and stop what's going on.
And right now, I think it's time that we're going to go to the Welcome Homes. Bob Gold.
Welcome home. Each week on Veterans Radio, we welcome home servicemen and women who've been stationed around the world in the service of their country, and they're coming home. 16 months in Iraq, hospital reservists returned to loved ones. For more than a year, soldiers from the 399th Combat Support Hospital patched up wounded and ill American troops and Iraqis in some of the most volatile parts of Iraq. The 399th, an Army Reserve unit of about 450 officers and enlisted personnel, were based in Massachusetts. They dealt with some of the hardest aspects of the war, routinely piecing together victims of roadside bomb attacks and treating disease in the dust-swept military bases, often under fire. Army Guard units returned from Iraq. The hopes and prayers of thousands of Guard family members and friends from across the state came true as 5 mobilized New York Army National Guard units returned home after nearly a year of duty in Iraq. The returned units included the 105th, 442nd Military Police Companies, the 719th Transportation Company, the 27th Support Center, Rear Aero Operations, and the 10th Transport Detachment. Welcome home, guys. We got a couple more here. Whoa, let's get back to Michigan. We got some Michigan soldiers coming back. Greenville Guard members returned from Iraq. Following a 12-month tour in Iraq, 206 Michigan Army National Guard soldiers from the Greenville-based 1073rd Maintenance Company returned home from Iraq. The soldiers were called to active duty October 2004 and sent to Fort Dix, New Jersey for in-process and mission-specific training. They arrived in Iraq last December 31st. While in country, the unit provided direct support, maintenance, and supplies to military units throughout western Iraq, processing more than 4,000 job orders. The unit also provided security for more than 100 convoy missions in the Al-Anbar province. Another Michigan group, Michigan Army National Guard medical units, are home from Iraq. They returned to Grand Ledge and Ypsilanti. Following a 14-month tour of duty in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, approximately 140 Michigan Army National Guard soldiers from the 146 Multifunctional Medical Battalion and the 1171 Area Support Medical Company, based in Ypsilanti, Michigan, returned home. The soldiers, who were mobilized to Fort Dix, New Jersey in July of 2006 for in-process and mission-specific training, they arrived in Iraq in September and October of 2006. The 146 provided administrative oversight for 13 medical detachments and or their companies. The 171 soldiers provided medical care to more than 24,000 patients, medical support at mass casualty incidents, and ground evacuation for patients needing higher levels of care. And last, one more, Michigan Grayling Guard Unit returning from Iraq. Following a 12-month tour in Iraq, 147 Michigan Army National Guard soldiers from the 171st Maintenance Company, based in Grayling, returned home from Iraq. The soldiers were called to active duty January 2005 and were sent to Fort Bliss, Texas, for in-processing and mission-specific training. They arrived in Kuwait in April 2005 and were sent to Iraq shortly afterwards. While in country, the 1071st supported the maintenance needs of various units such as the 42nd Infantry Division and the Tennessee National Guard's 278th Brigade Combat Team.
And we're back on Veterans Radio, and today's show is about slicks. And if you don't know what a slick is, we're going to learn right now from Gary Roush, who flew Chinook helicopters in 68, 69 in Vietnam. He's the unofficial historian of the Vietnam Helicopter Pilots Association. Welcome to Veterans Radio, Gary Roush.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Gary, how long you flew Chinooks? That's different than the slicks that we're going to be talking about. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Chinook is a lot larger.
Great big thing.
Yes.
Okay. Tell us about the helicopter in Vietnam. How many helicopters did we actually use over there?
We had about 12,000 helicopters for all services that flew during the Vietnam War. About half of those got destroyed. Out of the 12,000, about 7,000 were Hueys, so Hueys comprised the biggest portion of those, and about 3,300 Hueys were destroyed.
Tell us about the Huey. What was it? What was its main mission?
Okay, the Huey, the Huey was invented back in the 50s. To give you a little history, it was originally called the YH-40. It was a test helicopter. Bell Helicopter manufactured 10,005 Hueys between 1957 and 1975. And
it was a real workhorse, wasn't it?
Pardon?
It was a real workhorse, wasn't it?
Yes, yes, it was. It was a truck, a limousine. It did all kinds of missions, hauling people mostly, and then it got. The Army really got interested in the Huey when it was became useful for medevac. Of course, medevacs were started in Korea with the OH-13 Bell helicopter, and the Huey was a larger version. What made the Huey particularly useful in Vietnam was the invention of the turbine engine. And with the turbine engine, that gave it a lot more power to weight, so it could haul a lot more. So they also discovered that it could be used for combat assaults, And with the situation in Vietnam, with several hundred miles of border to protect between South Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, the helicopter permitted the military to have a lot fewer troops there than what really would have been needed to protect that long of a border.
Interesting point. The show today is about slicks. What designates a helicopter a slick?
A slick meant that it did not have guns on it. That's how that term became to be. It did have two M60 machine guns. It had two door gunners, the crew chief on one side and a gunner on the other side for its protection. But they was used primarily to haul troops. And depending on how much fuel they had, what the density altitude was, where they were located, how heavily the troops were had, how much heavy equipment they had with them, it could haul anywhere from 5 to 15 or 16 troops. Of course, the South Vietnamese were lighter; they were smaller people, so they could haul more South Vietnamese than they could Americans.
They had doors on the side, right?
Yes, they had two big sliding doors, one on each side,
like barn doors,
plus pilot doors. Of course, it was hot in Vietnam in most places, so those big sliding doors were normally open all the time. So, and in fact, there's been some interesting stories about RPGs and other things shot at Hueys where they fly in one door and out the other door and not hit anything.
I've heard those stories, but the doors were basically removed actually for quick ingress and egress, was it not? That's what I always assumed.
Well, they weren't. Yes, that's right. They weren't removed. They were left open.
Okay.
And in some cases they were removed, but in fact, even the pilot doors in some cases were removed, especially on gunships. What would
be the purpose for removing the pilot doors?
It was just get better visibility primarily.
Okay.
And also to stay a little cooler with a little more airflow.
I know it was hot on the ground. I didn't realize it was that hot up there.
Well, the problem was we never got very high. The Huey never got much over 1,500 feet, which is traffic pattern altitude for the Air Force. So it doesn't cool off very much at that elevation. But of course, you're moving through the air, so you have it's like having a big fan blow on you all the time. That's cooler.
We're talking to Gary Rausch, who's the unofficial historian for the Vietnam Helicopter Pilots Association. Later on, if you have a helicopter story that you would like to tell about slicks, you can call Veterans Radio at 877-573-7825. That's 877-573-7825 right here on Ave Maria Radio. Gary, how many pilots rotated in and out of Vietnam? How many did we have altogether? Do you have any idea?
Yes, we had approximately 40,000 helicopter pilots flew in the Vietnam War. Most of those, of course, were in Hueys because that was the most common helicopter. We had 2,196 helicopter pilots killed in Vietnam and 2,717 crew members, that would be crew chiefs, flight engineers, and gunners, killed in Vietnam.
Gary, we want to thank you for being on Veterans Radio, and we'd like to have you back on in the future because we're going to be talking about the helicopter and warfare in future shows, and we're going to need to hear some of the facts from you. And thank you very much for being on Veterans Radio.
Okay, I have just one other fact for you to chew on, and that is I believe that the Huey has more combat flight time than any other aircraft in the history of warfare.
Really? Even the B-17?
Yes.
That's significant.
Yeah, if you think about the B-17 might fly 6-hour missions, but they were only exposed to combat for 10 to 20 minutes out of that 6 hours. Not true for the Hueys. The Huey was exposed to hostile fire for just about every minute that they were flying.
Yeah, right. I was just thinking about that 1,500 feet in the air. That was an easy reach for an anti-aircraft gun.
That sure was.
Okay, I'm sure you guys found that out. Again, Gary, thank you so much for being on Veterans Radio.
You're welcome.
And right now, I believe we have Charlie Kettles on the line. Is that right, Bob?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, Charlie.
Yeah.
Welcome to Veterans Radio.
Well, thank you.
Charlie Kettles of Ypsilanti, Michigan. You flew 2 tours over there. You were a major. In 1967, you were the platoon commander in the 176th Assault Helicopter Company. And in 69-70, you were the company commander of the 121st Assault Helicopter Company. Were you flying slicks all the time?
Yes.
Okay. How many missions do you think you flew, Charlie?
Oh, I have no idea.
All right. A lot. Okay. You guys took fire going in and out of the LZs.
Well, yeah.
A lot of hostile fire. You ever lose a helicopter?
2 in one day.
And what happened at the end of that day? How many helicopters were lost altogether on that day, Charlie?
21. They weren't all destroyed, but they were all damaged beyond mission ready.
What was the mission that you were flying?
The support of the 1st Brigade of the 101st Airborne Division.
What area was that?
That's up in the central highlands of Vietnam. From Duc Pho, we were based at Duc Pho along with the 1st Brigade, and that was right along the coastline and operating in the hills of the central highlands.
When you say you lost 2 helicopters in one day, does that mean you were shot down, or that they were shot, you made it back, but they were shot to pieces so bad that they wouldn't fly again?
That's more accurate. They were, one had 29 rounds and the other one had 30-some rounds. And they were evac by a CH-47 down to Vung Tau, and then later moved back to Corpus Christi to either salvage or rebuild, whichever they could do. And I have no idea what happened to those 2.
So you got on the ground and then you couldn't get back up again, is that right? And they were sling lifted back for repairs?
Exactly.
Okay. What did you do during that time?
During which time?
Well, I imagine it was a hot LZ, is that correct?
Well, yes.
And how did you occupy your time while your helicopter wouldn't take off again?
Well, they were damaged in the LZ or in going into or out of the LZ, and simply made it back to the base camp with the helicopter.
Okay. For the people that are listening in who were not veterans, an LZ would be a landing zone, and a cold LZ would be one that you weren't taking hostile fire, and a hot LZ was one where you were taking hostile fire.
Correct.
How big would these LZs be? Did they vary in size?
Well, yes, because of the terrain, the amount of foliage and such, they varied greatly. Most of those in the Central Highland where the combat assaults were made were quite confining, and the one particular one we're talking about now was we had to go into a trail formation to go in there because there wasn't the room laterally to go in a normal V.
How many troops were you carrying at a time in there?
Normally 40, and that we had the D model, which was the early version of the UH-1, and had was referred to as a -11 engine, which was kind of weak. So we're pretty much limited to 5 combat troops.
Charlie, you told me the story one time about when you lost 2 helicopters that day and the 21 helicopters total, about your commanding officer taking you to breakfast. Tell us that story.
Well, the following morning, why the 2 of us went down for breakfast, which was not unusual, but he made a point of asking me to join him for breakfast, and he at that point the company really had no helicopters left to support the troops, and on the last pickup the day before, we had borrowed 5 from a sister unit, the one and to complete the mission because we only had one flyable and available. So at that point, that is the following day, we really had no helicopters to support the unit. That is the 1st Brigade of the 101st. And so he said, well, Chuck, I'm going to reassign you to flight operations. You'll be the operations officer, and maybe you can figure out what an assault helicopter company can do with no helicopters.
That was a compliment, I take it.
Well, I don't know whether it's a compliment or not, but he was a pretty laid-back individual, not very excitable, and probably one of the finest gentlemen I ever worked with.
The fact that you had no helicopters, I think, has to describe or illustrate the ferocity of the fire that you guys were taking in those LZs.
Well, certainly, to take down 21 helicopters, make them no longer mission capable, represented a lot of fire. And yet, but in that landing zone, we had a lot of Air Force support, we had gunship support, artillery support, but they just couldn't dampen the enemy.
Charlie, thanks for being on Veterans Radio. We're coming up on a break in a few seconds, and sometime in the future, I'd like to have you back on. Thanks for being on Veterans Radio. We'll be right back.
Have a good day.
The Medal of Honor is the highest award for valor in combat given a member of the Armed Forces of the United States. There have been over 3,400 recipients of the nation's highest award. This is one of them. Major Bruce Crandall made 14 flights into the Valley of Death, evacuating wounded. Details after this. Crandall made several routine flights into the Ia Trang Valley in November of 1965, transporting a battalion of troops. Suddenly, the ground troops came under a massive attack from the NVA. On Crandall's next flight, 3 soldiers on board were killed and 3 wounded, but he remained in the line of fire so 4 wounded men could be loaded on his chopper. Crandall, along with Captain Ed Freeman, continued to make supply runs into the battle zone and airlift wounded out. During the course of the day, he flew 3 different choppers, with 2 of them so badly damaged they could no longer fly. At the end of the day, it evacuated 70 wounded men and brought in supplies which helped the battalion to survive. Freeman was awarded the Medal of Honor in July of 2001. President Bush awarded the Medal of Honor to Crandall on February 26, 2007. The Medal of Honor series is a production of Veterans Radio.
And we're back, and we're going to hear the rest of that, what happened with the pilot Crandall. He was flying in and out of the Ia Trang Valley and was awarded the Medal of Honor just recently. Is that not right, Dale?
Yeah, they finally awarded it to him after 35 years or so. And it sounds like we have a little technical glitch there.
Right.
And But we wanted to make sure that we got a pilot in there for receiving the Medal of Honor. Not too many of them did.
You're listening to Veterans Radio being brought to you by the Ave Maria Radio. If you have a slick story, it's 877-573-7825. We have Robert Mason on the line, who's the author of Chicken Hawk, best-selling author. He told the story in here of his tour of 65, 68, flying Huey helicopters with the 1st Cav. Is that Robert Mason? Are you with us?
Yes, I am. How you doing? Good morning.
Good. Were you? And Dale Throneberry is going to be exchanging stories with you, hopefully. Did you get the chance to hear Charlie Kettles, Bob?
Yes, I did. Yes.
That man is one of the most modest and quiet people, and if you were to meet him, you would never imagine the things that he did. And I wish we had a full hour to talk to him. He was just a magnificent person. But most of the pilots I've met are that way. You guys are, you did things that are unbelievable, and it was like, oh shucks, just another day at the office.
Yeah. Well, I think pilots have a particular personality, I believe. Hanging around all my life, I've noticed that. It was a perfect plan. The United States Army needed some guys willing to jump into these weird machines and fly off into a hail of bullets. Well, there are certain people born with these inclinations.
Did flying a helicopter come easy to you?
Yes, well, this way, it was a challenge. Helicopter flying is always a challenge from a pilot's point of view. Before I went into the Army, I was a private pilot by the age of 17, flying fixed wing.
Oh.
And so when I got into the Army training program, I thought I knew everything. I could fly. And so the first part of my book is involved about the experience I had when I brought a helicopter to a hover and was trying to hang there, keep it in the space of a cow pasture, It's going all over the place like a wild beast. And the guy said, "Hey, don't worry about it. We'll just keep practicing in smaller fields."
I've always thought that flying a helicopter is a little bit like rubbing your belly with one hand, patting your head with the other, doing tap dancing with one foot and waltzing with the other. I don't know how you guys did that.
It just takes practice like anything else. I'm reminded of juggling. I juggle for fun, and once you've practiced it, it comes pretty easily. And once you've flown as many hours as we flew in Nam and so forth, the machine becomes part of your body. I mean, you're flying along, you don't even realize you're in a machine sometimes. It's quite fun.
It got quite fun. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's quite fun. I've always loved aviation. I have to say that in this particular case, being drawn into the war in Vietnam was unexpected in my fantasies, But at the age of I was 22 when I went to Vietnam. I thought that this could be, what the word is, exciting from that point of view at that age, and flying, and being that I love to fly, and using that ability in combat seemed like it would be exciting.
And let's get right to the missions, because these shows go so fast. You look back and you say, where did the time go?
Sure.
I read your book many years ago, and that was the first time I ever heard about you guys using your helicopters as weed whackers, more or less. Tell us about that.
Well, mostly it was inadvertent, but occasionally we used that ability to actually clear out LZs for ourselves. We couldn't hit really big branches, but I'm talking things that would bring down a fixed wing airplane, for example. Of course, we also did ruin the blades doing it.
Sure.
But you're speaking about Bruce Crandall. I was at Idrang when he was there during the operations you'll be talking about, and at one case we landed into a really, really tight area to check out Air Force A-1E that had been shot down, and our crew chief and gunner went over to the site where it was just basically obliterated. They're just exploding ammunition and stuff, and we started taking mortar rounds while we were parked down at the bottom of this hole that we had cut. I mean, when we came to a harbor and we settled down straight to the shaft down through the clearing, the blades were actually popping off tree limbs and things that stuck into that shaft. So it was quite exciting.
And the fellow that was just awarded the Medal of Honor, Dale, it was what you were saying about what Americans will do to go after their fellow Americans. That doesn't have to be in the same unit, even the same branch of the service.
No, I think that, and probably Bob will agree with this, that whenever we got a call that somebody needed help, we would always go get them. And being 22, you didn't think about it. You just said, okay, let's just go get them. And that's when we normally ended up doing the weed whacking stuff.
And Dale, I want you to tell the story that you told me in private one time about going down through the triple canopy jungle to get the wounded grunt.
One of the things about a Huey, and Gary was kind of touching on this, is that it is the most amazing machine, I think, out there. You can go any direction, up, down, backwards, sideways, and all kinds of things. And we had to pick up some wounded guys that were down in a jungle area underneath what we referred to as a triple canopy. And my crew chief and door gunner were great traffic directors, along with my co-pilot that day. And we went down into the jungle trees, and we had to go back and forth to find our way through the trees. And by the time we got down to the very ground, it was dark above us because the trees had appeared to grow back in over us. And as I put it on the ground, the door gunner said, "Now be very careful, put it down very gently." And I put it down gently, and I said, "What's the big deal?" And he says, "Because the tail rotor's in the fork of a tree." And it was.
How high off the ground were you at that point?
I was, at my 3-foot hover, and then I started to set it down, and he goes slower, and we got it down, and we ended up coming back out again, and it was like going through a maze.
See, this is what drives me insane. Dale, you told that story in more detail. You went through one hole in the triple canopy, and with the gunners hanging out the sides, looking for another hole, and the other hole was between the top canopy and the middle canopy.
Well, we went down and we had to slide sideways, and then go down into another hole and slide back and down into another hole, and I don't know what possessed me with the idea that I could do that. And
all those trunks of trees sticking up between the canopies, right?
But it's, you knew exactly how much space that you had to work in. It's like, when we drive our car, it's like, you'd pull right up there and you're 2 inches away.
Listen, I told you guys up front, I don't want to hear a lot of modesty on this show. I want you guys you're representing what everybody did.
Bob will agree with this. If you made it through flight school, you were a good pilot.
Okay.
That's absolutely true. The training was phenomenal. The only time that I was ever shot down in Nam, a guy in front of me had gotten shot to the non-existent chest protector. We didn't have chest protectors at the time.
Ooh.
And he just sat back down on the LZ as we were taking off. Anyway, as I got up to about 800 feet, I heard some rounds hit the aircraft. Actually, the rounds had hit me while I was flying by him just off the ground. And then when I got up to about 800 feet, the engine quit. And the first thing that happened is my left hand slammed down, just like I was on a check ride in flight school. And I came back around, turned upwind, I did all the right things. Turned upwind, looked ahead, saw a clearing, got a thing on the radio said that there's a clearing ahead. You may be just friendly grunts there, So I just made an auto rotation from about 800 feet down and landed in this little tiny place.
Of course, you didn't have a choice whether they were friendlies or unfriendlies.
Well,
right?
That's the truth. I was lucky as hell. Everything was lucky about it. But the fact was the training was so excellent that there wasn't one moment of doubt what I was going to do in terms of auto rotation, which is a tricky maneuver. It's got to be done just right because you only get one chance when you come down at the bottom of an auto rotation. You have no power. So if you flare wrong or do anything else wrong, you don't get a go around. So in the Army, we taught auto rotations all the time. When I went back to flight school as an instructor, I had 1,200 auto rotations on I logged over there.
Really, Dale, you had pretty much the same experience.
Yeah, we were flying along, and I made one of the major mistakes, and I heard this in another story that we had done before, as we were doing one of those lower level recons that majors and things wanted. And he says, I think I saw somebody. Let's go back and look again. And then I went back the same way I'd gone the first time. Dumb. And blew out our windshield and came up through the chin bubble and hit the cyclic and went through the controls, and all the bells and whistles went off, and was able to climb out to altitude. And then the crew chief came over the intercom, and he says, we got a fuel leak. And I'm going, well, how bad? And he goes, Niagara Falls. And the next thing it went quiet. I'd never heard nothing before. And we just, we started to fall. You lowered everything, kicked into pedal, and went back and found a landing zone, did our auto rotation, yelled out over Mayday over the radio, and was on the ground for maybe, it seemed like 4 hours, but probably about 5 minutes. And the next thing is guys came in and picked us up. But it was, the training was incredible. And in reading Bob's book, for all you pilots out there that are listening, if you haven't read Chicken Hawk, it's a great adventure, and it will bring back many, many memories. A lot of them are very good memories, too.
Where did the title come from, Bob?
The ambivalence being, sometimes you would feel like if I go out there, I'm going to get killed. You start feeling nervous about the whole thing, and then when you're out there, you're turning into some kind of, killing machine, really. I mean, you got to be really good at what we did. But there's always that, at least among mortals, at least, like me, you can get scared in combat. I mean, it's heavy-duty stuff coming up. I remember watching some of the times we'd be early morning flights. We'd be way back, and we were supposed to be landing in an LZ up on the horizon. You could see the Air Force strike. You could see the smoke coming away. Then we get closer, our gunships would come down next to us, and they start rattling off, and we could see all the focus of activity of what's up ahead is where we were going. and we were flying ourselves there, and we closed our formations in tighter, and we had to go in there and stop, land, let the grunts out, and take off again. It was very exciting. And as you transitioned from the butterflies in your stomach, as you got going into it, suddenly everything clicked into place, and you knew exactly what you were doing. You weren't distracted by all the noise and chaos and radio calls and junk. And you just did it. It was just kind of a beautiful experience because you must be high on adrenaline and whatnot.
We're coming up on a break right now. We're talking to Bob Mason, author of Chicken Hawk, and Dale Throneberry, both slick pilots. We'll be right back right after this break. And we're back on Veterans Radio. We're listening to Dale Throneberry of Veterans Radio, an old slick pilot, and Robert Mason, author of Chicken Hawk, another slick pilot, and we're talking about the pilots, the slick pilots of the Vietnam War. If you have a story that you wanted to relate about the slick pilots, 877-573-7825. Bob?
Yes.
What was your feeling about the grunts that you were carrying in and out?
My feeling about them? I was absolutely, I thought they were all crazy. I mean, I'm standing out at some of the stuff we did. We'd come in, in Ia Drang, guys would be, as we came into the LZs there, it was just chaos in this place. There was a lot of smoke from the fire. These guys would start yelling like, snarling almost, shouting. They wanted to fight. It was incredible. And leapt off the chopper as we came into the LZs, and then I had the misfortune of seeing a couple of them not make it even 10 feet away from my helicopter. I stood in awe of their courage.
Dale, how about you?
Well, I think this is something we talked about before. At the time, I think much like Bob, I thought
Is Dale not with us?
Yeah, I'm here. But I think that we, as I was saying, we think that the grunts, or whatever you want to call them, were nuts because they would jump off. I mean, we're crazy enough just flying into the place when you can see it exploding around, and then they get off, and we get to leave, and they have to stay. And I think that once we got out of the service, we got back. I got to the feeling of this mutual admiration society, is that we admired them so much for their courage and so forth. And every time I am introduced to a group of infantry now, they all, they give you hugs and clap our hands and everything else and say, "Thank God for you pilots," and we're going, "Thank God for you." It's and I kind of, as I opened the show today, I said, above the best, and that is what the motto is of the flight school down at Fort Rucker, was above the best, and I think we really took that to heart.
We have somebody on hold on the air. Is that a guy from Ann Arbor? Who is this? Are you on?
I am.
And who are we speaking to?
My name is Gary Calhoun, and I was not a slick pilot in Vietnam. I was a medical evacuation pilot, and flew out of Dong Tam before it was turned over to the Vietnamese during the Vietnamization, which was in 4 Corps, and then moved up to Long Ben, and actually flew closely. I just found out an email with Dale in the same area, and we later, 30 years later, had a work experience together. But my comment would be similar to those others that talk about a mutual admiration society. A dust-off pilot like I was Medical Service Corps, and you'd go into any bar and they would find out you were a dust-off pilot, and the grunts, you'd never have to buy a drink because they admired you so much. And
well, a dust-off is a medical evacuation, basically.
No guns.
No guns. Oh,
no guns. Just a red target on your helicopter. I think that's really the only. I want to, one thing I want to do is praise the slick pilots, because slick pilots were also medical evacuation helicopter pilots, because they a lot of times were at the scene closer. We always got to places. We tried to. I think the average time was around 15 minutes after they did all the research during the war. We went to our 30th reunion, where Mike Novosol, who was a medevac pilot, got the Congressional Medal of Honor. Fortunately, was still alive then, and he's author of a book or two himself. I feel honored to be on this show with such outstanding people that have written books. Certainly I have not done that, but
Gary, tell us when you were down there, those grunts weren't always just right there where you landed, were they? You had to wait for them?
And we would have to go. We used to, go a lot of places where, they didn't have smoke. I remember when we were working down in the Delta, flying. Fortunately, it was so dark down there. Flying to a match, actually, one time, they had come under attack. They had lost their strobe lights because the strobe light down in Fort Corps, where it was so dark and no trees, worked very efficiently. Well, their strobe light was out of batteries or whatever, and so all they had was the match, and fortunately we were able to get to them. And flying medevac, we had to do a lot of hoist missions, and maybe that's the biggest difference between Slicks and medevac, because the Slicks did do medevac for us when they were right on the scene, and we didn't have time. They had need to get guys out of there before a medevac chopper could be called from where it was stationed off-site to get on-site where the action was. And by the way, there was never a cold LZ that we went to. We were always told it was a cold LZ. There was never a hot LZ. It was never hot till you came in and started taking fire.
Gary, we're going to be doing a show in the future on the medevac dust-off pilots, and guess what? You've been nominated. You'll be back on Veterans Radio.
So I'll certainly be happy to do that. But like I say, the admiration for. Also, I wanted to comment on the Hueys that we flew. I was doing a hoist mission one night. We were actually picking up some Thai forces, and we hoisted the guys in. And while we were pulling out, we took fire. Actually, I could feel the helicopter rising up in the air. And when we got back to camp, I did a running landing because I didn't know what could have been shot up. And tail rotor failure is one thing that if things are shot up and you've lost it, but you can still fly, you don't know you've lost it until you try to come to a hover and you start spinning around. It had 54 holes in it when I got back. That's how tough a bird the Huey was. So we were fortunate to have that machine.
And that says a lot about the pilots. Gary, thank you so much for being on Veterans Radio.
Thank you. I feel honored.
And we're back with Bob Mason. Bob and Dale Throneberry, both Slick pilots. You guys, you flew night missions too. Dale, I've heard you talk about...
I hated night. I hated night when I went through flight school and had to do night flying. And we would land, we worked with Special Forces up northwest of Tay in 3 Corps and dropped people over on the other side of the border before it was popular. And they would invariably would drop them off in a one-ship insert, and they would run into trouble in the middle of the night. And when they were in the middle of the night, we had to go out and get them. And so we went over to get them one night, and they didn't even have a match. We were homing in on them on the radio. And as we're homing in, the guy's supposed to talk or keep the mic open so we can follow the little needle. And we kept asking him to talk, speak up. And he says, I can't. They're right here. And we went in to get him, and it turned into daylight. It was so bright with everything else going off around us. But it was. I hate night flying.
Especially night flying over jungle. Bad terrain. That was
bad terrain. And when they would shoot at you, they shot at you with those tracers, and you'd see this, this line of water coming up at you, green lines, and then solid it looked like, and then you'd realize that there's 5 bullets between every one of those.
Right. And they had green tracers. That's what
supposed to, but when the red ones started coming up at us, that got us really nervous.
Which were ours. Bob,
supposedly.
We've got less than 3 minutes left. Is there anything you wanted to talk about on your own, your fellow pilots, or anything at all, Bob?
Going back to the aircraft, I thought it might be interesting for people to know that the Huey's coming back into the Army inventory. Specifically, the same Huey we flew in Vietnam, single engine, is coming back into the inventory because it's economical, to say the least. It costs a couple $1 million versus these days a Black Hawk runs for $18 to $22 million, for example.
Is the Huey more efficient than the Black Hawk?
It depends. For for what it does, it's very efficient. But they are both efficient for what they do. In other words, the Blackhawk could come over and lift a Huey full of people and fly away with it.
Wow.
It's a much bigger machine, much more capable of lifting heavy things. But the Huey is a simple machine, and the design goes way back, to probably the first produced helicopter in the United States. Really, the rotor head and stuff was all designed back in the 30s and 40s, really. And it was designed originally to be a air ambulance. That was the request put out by the Department of the Army.
We've got a little over a minute left. When you guys were waiting for the grunts, we talked about dust off, and you guys picked up the grunts. You'd have to sit there. Everybody thought you were calm by the way that you looked, but you would have to sit there while you were waiting for the grunts to work their way over towards you with their wounded buddies.
Well, yeah. You didn't want people to see you cry, did you?
Or scream.
No, you just had to stick it out. That was the most frustrating parts of all the evacuations and even landings, because sometimes you brought people in, you had to, while everything was still going on, taking a lot of fire from the bad guys across the LZ and stuff. We often would have to wait until every ship had been loaded, so we could all leave simultaneously, etc. So there's this traffic management under fire. It was really nerve-wracking.
Well, this hour has gone by so fast. If you want to, pardon me, if you want to read about the helicopter pilots in Vietnam, Chicken Hawk, and where can that be bought right now, Bob?
Especially any bookstore in the country, and Amazon.com.
Great. It's a great read. I think I'm going to go back and read it again. Bob Mason, author of Chicken Hawk, Slick Pilot, 1965-66 with the first cab. Thank you so much for being on Veterans Radio. And Dale Throneberry, we didn't get to the story about you said your heroes were the gunship pilots.
Oh, yeah, our gallows humor with our gun platoon we call the Thunder Chickens.
Okay, and we're going to come back with another time, and you're going to tell the story about while you were waiting on the ground for the wounded guy to get there. You're listening to Veterans Radio. Tune in next week. We're going to do a story on docs, the medics, and corpsmen. And then after that, we're going to do a story on War Dogs 2. You heard War Dogs. Now you're going to hear War Dogs 2 about the other type of dogs that were used in the Vietnam War. And we want to thank everybody for listening in. We want to, again, thank our sponsors. And from Veterans Radio, you are dismissed.
The opinions expressed on this program are those of our guests and are not necessarily those of Veterans Radio or this station. Veterans Radio is a production of Veterans Radio, LLC.